Hello and welcome to the Feeder Series podcast, your guide to keeping up to date on everything in the junior single-seater world. And this week we are keeping up to date on the latest goings-on in F1 Academy, and we're speaking quite literally after the checkered flag has just waved. We've just watched Charlotte Tilbury waving the flag, and Calla has jumped on immediately before the press conference as well, so thank you so much, Calla Krakaski, for joining us, who's back after the round 2 of F1 Academy, but not alone, because we've also got Juan Arroyo joining us for covering quite a few championships which are starting out. He is our Euro Cup 3, our Euroformula Open, and our Spanish F4 editor, so we've got a lot going on there. And last, but absolutely by no means least, we have a driver joining us. A driver I had the fortune of meeting last week in Portimao, Francesco Simonazzi, the triple podium finisher. I watched those races coming in. Who's joining us now as well after what sounded like, Francesco, quite a long non-racing day today. You want to talk us through how things are going for your end?
Well, it certainly started with a bop because I wasn't expecting to do this good this weekend. And then an unexpected pole position on Saturday was totally unexpected. I was trying to guess how the track would go. And when my engineer called me and he asked me what tire I wanted, and I said to him, it's still for rain, even though it was drying out. You could see that in the braking zones and in the entering phases it was drying out, but the problem was the exit. It was still too slippery to put on a new set of dry. Also, the time was running out. Basically, I had one lap, and if I put the new dry tires, I would have probably just lost an entire lap, second lap, and a third lap. So it was the right decision. And as I said when we talked about it on Sunday after race 3, the tires were dead. Basically, half of the tire was missing, only the external part, because I was using it so much that I heated up on the single lap, which is crazy to do. And then I managed to destroy it, but then do the fast lap.
What I want to actually explain, for the benefit of anybody who is not a Euroformula Open expert, and I mean, we're Feeder Series people here, and Feeder Series know we're only talking about a niche subject, which is not F1 or IndyCar. We're going on to the lower levels of stuff here. But Juan, you have been covering the championship, and this year we've got, well, the first round had 6 drivers, meant to be a few more, and some of those were cameo appearances and whatnot. Francesco won, so just a little bit of context. Francesco, you won the first race, got P3 at the next 2. But Juan, we've got a small championship in Euroformula Open this year, but it's been, we've had Felipe Drugovich dominate it. Oli Goethe has come from there, and we've had good drivers coming. What's going on? What's your take on the Euroformula Open for the 2024 season?
Well, yeah, as you say, it's obviously pretty small grid compared to years past. Even then, the past 3 years, the size has been constantly decreasing. But I think still we're bound to see some good racing despite the small grids. I mean, if you look at the race in Monza last year, you can think of it almost like pack racing. It was really exciting, fast sweeping right-hander just after turn 2. You had all those cars close up and you made for really exciting viewing. Still, it's a small grid, but I think Francesco and Brad Benavides are, at least from round 1, they seem pretty tight together in terms of pace. And I don't doubt that in the future rounds, that may still continue to be the case. I mean, Francesco, I don't know what you're expecting in terms of pace throughout the season.
Well, we're hoping that we can still manage this kind of pace. As I said, we were a bit stunned from what we've seen on Tuesday because we didn't think that we would have been that quick and that near to Brad Benavides, which is obviously the one that is going to fight for the championship title this year. The next round is going to be a new circuit for me. I don't know if Motopark tested there, if they raced there already. But for me, it's a completely new one. I didn't even try it out on the simulator, on iRacing, nothing else. So basically, we're kind of going blind for the setup. And I'll try to do as much as I can on the Dallara simulator, which is a rather similar, rather similar result compared to the track ones, because we can do setup changes, we can manage the tires, change the pressure on them, and we try to work on that. But it's the only thing that we have that we can do to enter Hockenheim with a good setup and with a good car.
Now, I just wanted to bring up as well, when talking about what we've got with Euroformula Open and what we're referring to when we talk about, again, just to explain to those who aren't aware, what Francesco here is up against, Juan, is that there is BVM Racing with Francesco Simonazzi as a driver, but then there's Team Motor Park with, well, it seems like a literal 5 versus 1 sort of situation, which is why it was such a big deal when Francesco won that first race run. It's not... This isn't what we've got in F1 Academy, which Calla's going to talk about in a second, where you've got, well, Prem have 4 cars, but then everyone else is like 3 cars each. This is like almost a David versus Goliath sort of situation, when you've got multiple cars for one team, and then one car, one driver at the other. It seems unfair almost in some ways, but Francesco beat them out. Motorpark have been in the championship for a long time, Juan, and how have things changed over the years?
I mean, they joined in 2019 when Formula European Masters was cancelled. That was after the folding of European F3. And they've basically dominated ever since then. I mean, every single champion has come either from their satellite team, Crypto Racing, or Motopark itself. And really, as you say, it's a 5v1 at this point. You've got pacey drivers each round that are coming in from Motopark, either as one-off entries or as full season entries. And yeah, they've obviously been the dominant force. They were a strong force in championships past over the past decade. And now they've really only centered on Euroformula Open in European single-seaters. So being able to put all their focus on that, undoubtedly, they're going to have strong lineups and strong races every year.
It's a championship which, when you see 6 cars or 6 drivers, you're thinking that's going to be not particularly entertaining. I can attest in person and watching the highlights on YouTube as well. It was absolutely barnstorming racing. So very excited to see how it goes. And Francesco, we're going to hear a lot more from you as well. We've got a few audience questions to go through. But Calla, you've been waiting patiently so far, and you must be buzzing after second round of F1 Academy that you've been covering. And what a round it was. We've been in Miami, and it's been... there's a million different puns I could do about somebody pulling away with the championship, but it's been an Abby pulling weekend, but it has been entertaining racing as well. So 2 races, what have been your takeaways so far?
I mean, like you said, Abby Pulling is had a just totally dominant weekend, pretty much identical to what Dorian Pin did in Jeddah. They both won 2 races. They both got 2 pole positions and finished with 1 fastest lap on track. Obviously, in Jeddah, we saw Pin's penalty take that away. But Abby Pulling has really taken advantage of the gap that had already formed due to the penalty to Pin, and she just ran with that. So this weekend, she won both races in quite a dominant fashion. I think the first one was over 5 seconds. The second one was something like over 3 seconds. She's one of 5 of the drivers who were here with W Series in 2022. So she has a little bit of experience on that track. And actually, Chloe Chambers and Bianca Bustamante also were in that group, and they were the podium. They were in the podium positions along with Dorian Pin, who was the only podium finisher who did not have previous experience on that track. So I think that's interesting to look at, especially when we have Singapore coming up, which is another place that W Series went, but not many other drivers will have had a lot or had any experience on. And then we've seen, I don't know, I thought the first race was particularly exciting. Chloe Chambers was amazing. She made some great moves to get up into a podium at her home race. And Bianca Bustamante, who had a podium, who finished P2 in the second race, I would say was even more impressive in the first race. Because, she started towards the front of the field. She had a stall and was dead last at the end of the first lap. And then she made up to P7 on track before she got a penalty that put her P9 in the first race. So I think she was very impressive in the first race. Honestly, even more so than in the second race, at least with the moves that she was making. because in the second race she didn't really show off as much with pulling away in front of her.
Yeah, I've got to say, from my perspective, I know Juan, you watched as well, so please let us know your thoughts. But Bianca always seemed quite, not necessarily error prone, but there's always been either running off track. She stalled before. She has struggled somewhat, and this seemed to be the first time I've actually seen a race where she's had it almost faultless. She wasn't able to close in on pulling, but I don't think anybody was going to this weekend. But she did seem to be actually in a position where, no, I'm going to keep the car pointing the right direction, and she was away from everyone. She had a good start. She really pressured pulling from the off. This is where I've got everything fresh in my brain, which is very rare when I do a podcast, so I can remember everything that happened.
Yeah, and to jump in there, sorry. After the first race, pulling was like, I think I only made one mistake, which was locking up in the first corner, and she made the same mistake in the second race with Bustamante putting probably even more pressure on her than Pin had in the first race. So that was, I think, interesting to see, because I know she wanted to fix that for herself, to get that perfect race, and she wasn't quite able to, although it was pretty close.
Yeah, well, pole position, fastest lap, leading every lap is pretty close to. I mean, if you can lock up.
I don't think the lockup really matters in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, well, I'm marking that down. That's a 7 out of 10, Abby. That's pathetic. You have to do better than that. But Juan, what do you think about your? We're talking about this smaller grid and with the entertainment we've had in Euroformula, but it's not the deepest grid in F1 Academy. Although I absolutely love that every single livery is different. Like, of all the things that you can take from F1 Academy, it's brilliant because I can recognize every single car like immediately. But Juan, have you enjoyed F1 weekend, F1 Academy's weekend, should I say, in Miami?
I actually have. I mean, first off, the diversity in deliveries is something that you don't get in Euroformula Open. It's a 5v1, and it's 5 motor parks, except Fernando Barrichello's car, which, frankly, I find beautiful. Besides that, I'm pretty proud of myself.
Brad's got his little AIX one as well, though, the PHM sort of goldy brownie livery that he ran.
Of course, as well. But I have to say, in F1 Academy, I'm pretty proud of myself because in one of the Transfer Weekly episodes over the winter, I put Abby Pulling as one of the stronger contenders, if not the one to watch in the championship this year, which, I mean, in hindsight may seem like an obvious choice, but she's pulling away now with those 3 wins. She's really been not even a revelation because everyone knows her talent, but yeah, you didn't even hear much from her in race 1. I guess that's just a reflection of how ahead she was of Dorian Pan. But yeah, I've been enjoying it a lot. Happy for Chloe Chambers, who got her first podium this season. She put on some great defensive moves on Maya Woog. Yeah, honestly, great weekend. Obviously, I think Miami is an underrated track. Colorful place, colorful championship. Honestly, great weekend to be a viewer.
I'm going to bring you in quickly, Francesco. I know you weren't able to watch F1 Academy, but one of the things which I think I can get your opinion on, one, you may be wanting to put a pulling pun like everyone else has. God, pulling pin, that's close. that's the order of the championship. But what I was going to say is from Calla, she came on, it feels like an age ago because Saudi Arabia was quite a few weeks ago, 2 months or so ago. And it's having a stop again because the next race is late June for Barcelona. But Euroformula, by comparison, see what I did there, segue, you've kind of going boom, 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 boom. Like you've got 2 weeks, and then it's about a month until Hungary, but then it's going quite a lot. How much of an assistance do you get when you have consistency, be able to get in the car quite a lot rather than having those big delays?
I think it's far better. It helps you not lose the focus and to remember the mistakes that you made on the last race. Because if you have such a big gap between 2 races, you're sure is going to lose something in between them. Some mistakes on the car, some mistakes on the setup that probably weren't written on the computer. And what you do basically is to every weekend that you have, let's say the F1 Academy weekend was in Jeddah, then this one in Miami, there was 2 months. In that time period, you're for sure going to lose some ability on the car. I don't know if they're allowed to test. I don't know the rules about that championship.
They have a decent amount of testing compared to what used to exist, but it's still...
Then it's probably not the system, but the thing is, if I like my championship now, the Euroformula, I don't get used to the car every time I go to a weekend. It's basically a weekend of stop just to relax a bit, and then it's back on the car. but it's the same sensation that you had a week or so ago. So it's not something new. And I know this may sound stupid to say, but it's actually how it works. Even though when we are in the winter pause, and it's only about 3 months before we start testing out again, we have the winter test from the last race. For a normal person, 3 months seems like nothing. You don't forget everything about it. Actually, what I see every time is that as soon as I step on the car, 3 months later, I need to remember everything back again. Braking shapes, braking points, throttle application for certain turns, throttle application for other turns. And so I don't think it works for them. But if they are allowed to test, like we're not to, I don't think this problem is persistent. But still, more in a racing perspective, it doesn't help.
Can I ask a question there? With pulling and pin, both of them are competing in another series, and I think actually both of them are going to race right away next week. So for pulling, that's British F4, which is a similar car, not exactly the same, and then for pin, that's Freca, which is more different than the British F4 car. So they're not racing in the same car constantly, but they're still racing, at least more so than some of the other women in the field who are only doing F1 Academy. So how would you say that does that change anything, do you think?
It helps. It helps a lot. If you are able to do races with a similar type of car, it helps a lot. If I example did one race here and another one in the LMP2 car, since they're basically the same car, even though they weigh more and they have more horsepower, but their aerodynamic flow and the speed that you can take into corners, it's actually useful. You don't use weekends and you can train a lot. If you did example though, GT3 racing and then F4, F3 racing, that merely helped. It helps you to get more focused during the qualifying session and the racing session. But if you can do it with a similar car, it's preferable. So you don't even lose the feeling of a Formula car rather than a GT3 car, because I tested them both and are completely different. There are two different styles of driving, because in F4, in F3, in F2 and F1, you don't have traction control at all, and you don't have any ABS system that can help you to do something. While in the GT3 cars, they have ABS, which basically means that you can brake 50 meters into one turn without locking up. And then traction control helps you a lot because you can go on the throttle, rotate a bit the car, and then you just wait for the throttle control to cut off your power and then go back. But yeah, I think it helps them to keep the same amount of pressure on themselves, not to make mistake for the F1 Academy.
And I think that's something that we're starting to see more often. For example, one-off entries. I think a lot of F3 drivers and Freca drivers are starting to do these one-offs. For example, just last weekend we saw at Silverstone in GB3, James Wharton and Martinius Stenshorn. That's a very competitive championship. They had that one-off, and that's experience they could get to warm up for their seasons, or in Martinius' case, continue it. In Euro Cup 3, we're seeing Nikola Solov, who arguably, that Euro Cup 3 rain-affected round, it kind of lost that weekend, but still, it's valuable experience in the rain nonetheless. We saw it last year with Mari Boya, and even in testing, Francesco, you can attest to this, Mattias Sagaseta and Martinius Stenshorn were there. So I think we're starting to see a little bit of competition forming at this Formula regional level to attract these one-off entries to gain experience for F3.
We saw, not necessarily for F3, but we saw Lorenzo Flusha, obviously in Euroformula as well, winning the final race at Portimao, and he was doing that for his ELMS campaign, because they're going to Portimao later. So it's actually a thing, Francesco or Juan, whoever wants to jump on, that is something I think Euroformula stands to benefit from this year, because you have a very good calendar. Like, how much expectation are you for getting these sort of cameo drivers coming in, maybe from F3, maybe from Freca, just to get that experience?
Yeah, this annoys me a bit, but it basically what it does, it gives hope to the championship to gain more drivers, and then it loses them because they're changing or they're not even appearing on the next round. So it annoys me a bit because we're losing what Euroformula can actually do to a driver. I'm not a fan of the FRECA Championship. First of all, because I couldn't fit inside a car normally, since I'm quite tall. But it wasn't that problem. We could have probably found a solution. But trust me, I tried to fit in one FRECA car, and I didn't quite manage to put my feet on front on the pedals and then have my head under the halo. I was still a bit up, but it annoys me because the 320 Dallara can develop a driver in such a way that it basically can drive anything else after that one. With a FRECA car, you need to be more specific about that single car, since it weighs so much and it doesn't have that much as a downforce compared to the FO. As soon as you step into a car that has a high downforce, you need to work a lot on it. I'm not saying that FRECA drivers are less faster than us. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you need to get used to that type of car. Meanwhile, when you have an FO car, you stick around with the aerodynamics so much that it even comes to your mind what changes need to do to the car in order to make it go faster. And then you can apply that to other cars that uses the same amount of aerodynamics. For example, the LMP2 car.
I think in FRECA, that's been a main criticism of the series. I mean, that car has been called by several mechanics, drivers as, heavy under braking, not really efficient aerodynamically. And I think one of the main criticisms it being pushed in by the FIA at that Formula regional level in their F1 ladder is that really for the drivers, it maybe harms their development, because they're having to get used to this car and these characteristics that they won't ever see again. And thus, I mean, it is a year that they're spending competing at a higher level, but to what point if at the end of the day they're, sacrificing their development just to get used to that car? Francesco, I know you can speak a lot more on this.
Yeah. The only thing that matters now is the FIA championship points, which is also being another criticism to FIA, just because Max Verstappen managed to get into F1 at 17 years old, which the other didn't. And the FIA had to put a stop on this because of this a rise of new talents, very fast talents. And the FIA stated that the FO championship can get only about, was it 12 or 15 super license points? I don't remember quite well, but from what I remember, the others can give you up to, minimum 20 points, but only the FIA certificated ones. So F4, FRECA, F3, and F2. Then you get 40 points. And this is why people don't come into our championship. Not because the car is harder to use, but it's only about the FIA championship point, which is the only thing that matters now. If they remove them, we're probably going to see more cars in our championship. I'm not betting everything on it, but I think there will be quite a spike on the numbers.
We're going to have to wait and see because there's a lot that's, from what I gathered when I was in Portimao, there's a lot that might change in the next little while for Euroformula. So we need to come back onto that. But Calla, I know you've got to shoot off soonish for the press conference. I wanted to make sure we can get all of the valuable information out of your head before you have to shoot away. So you're going to be speaking again to Abby, but I know you had some other questions. Who was you speaking to through the week? I know you mentioned to the group chat. You've had the opportunity to be speaking to these drivers. How are you finding it all?
I mean, it's pretty cool. The pre-weekend press conference was with Jess Edgar and Carrie Schreiner. So yeah, talked to both of them. I don't know. Do you have anything specific?
No, it was more. No, well, there's one thing where you told me about the Schreiner. So from her perspective, it sounds like single seaters isn't going to be longer in her after this championship, which is unfortunate from the perspective of what it's meant to be achieving. F1 Academy.
Yeah, in that case, we were talking about FRECA actually as a next step for F1 Academy drivers, because Lena Bueller and Marta Garcia both went up to there, and then Pin as well. and Jess was like, yeah, I could see that as a step in my future, and Carrie was like, I think it could be a good step, but not for me. I want to focus more on possibly LMP2 or GT racing, which I think she already does some of. So yeah, I think Carrie Schreiner is already on the older end of drivers in F1 Academy. So it's not to say that she was never going to progress up the ladder further, because I don't think that was like something preordained. But I think the goal of the series is, or should be, to focus on the younger drivers and really as a step. We talked to Chloe Chong last week, or last time I was on the podcast, and she felt, I think, that maybe her step up was a bit too large of a step. But I think the most effective way for F1 Academy to progress women up the ladder is to focus on the younger ones, or the ones with less experience, because we're seeing, Freca as the next step, which, although I don't know if there is a age limit there, but with, I think, the male drivers that they are competing against are generally younger because they've had these experiences younger. So I think Freca as a next step from F1 Academy is probably more realistic anyway for the drivers who are on the younger end of the spectrum versus drivers like Carrie Schreiner.
Yeah, I'm looking to see which drivers do. I want to see the F3 step. That's what I want to see, whether it's via Freca or from F1 Academy. And it might be that Dorian Pan can do this dual campaign this year. And I think she's doing some GT3 or something as well. She's still got connections with that. So
she's on the Iron. She's connected with the Iron Dames, but she's stepping back from her GT3 commitments, other than Le Mans, to do Freca.
Okay.
So she was set to do a full year in the World Endurance Championship alongside F1 Academy, and when she took the Freca seat with Iron Dames, actually alongside Marta Garcia, she is stepping back from the GT3 program that she was doing.
I'm sure a lot of people can see her almost doing this dual campaign, that she might be the F3 step up next year, which would be massively exciting. I know we've Cisa Fleur-Flörsch holding her own there, but doing it as one drive by herself is one thing. But I wanted to talk, just because we spoke about the circuits and the excellent circuits that Euroformula has earlier, Calla, before you go, because I know you're going to shoot off into the press conference, and please just wave goodbye if you need to. But the next two rounds, Barcelona, Zandvoort, a little bit more traditional for European racing and the championships you get there. Do you think that's going to even the field out a little bit more?
I think so. I think for me, the most unfortunate thing about F1 Academy is the scheduling. Because whether or not the space between races is a good thing or not, and I think we've heard multiple perspectives, it really seems like F1 Academy gets the leftover tracks that F3 and F2 don't want or don't want to, cross the ocean for. I know, Juan, you said you think Miami was a bit underrated, but I don't think it's the greatest track for F4 cars. And I know, we saw with Maya Vogue, she was struggling on the straights, even with whatever, slipstream was being generated. She was, so I think with these circuits like Jeddah and Miami, and then later on with the street circuit like Singapore, where these places where we don't see a lot of F4 series racing, I think that might be, to me, I think a bit detrimental to the series, or at least in terms of giving these drivers experience that they can apply to other series or the next levels up. But with circuits like Barcelona and Zandvoort, which are coming up, I'm pretty sure both of those are on the Freca calendar as well. So I think that will, and those are places where there's more even experience across the fields, where you don't have 5 drivers who have driven here before. You have 10 or 12 drivers who have been here before. So yeah, like what you said, I think that will kind of even out the series a little bit more. Abby Pulling has been amazing, but I don't think that gap at the top is representative of of what's going on.
I looked at the championship, and it's Abby Pulling with 99 points, and Dorian Pan on 65.
It's like
51.
A 30,
it's like, well, how did that happen? There's been 4 races. It's more than max. It's been crazy. No, it's an interesting perspective, and I think you're quite right. There's not many other championships that race in Qatar or Miami, so it's a little bit little bit of a strange one. They need to go to Euroformula. I mean, they got all the cracking tracks, and you're completely right. I did just double check that you've got Zandvoort in June for Freca, and then they go to Barcelona in September. So it is that sort of useful stuff. But if you need to shoot off, Calla, please do. Juan, I need to come to you now because you're not covering just Euroformula. You've also covering Eurocup 3, and then you've also got F4 Spain as well. So what can you tell us about those championships before we grill Francesco Simonazzi with some audience questions?
Well, I'll kick off with Eurocup 3 because they already had their first round. Now, the first round of Eurocup 3 was a bit weird. Rain affected. We had the whole weekend pretty much disrupted. We had practice sessions, qualifying completely canceled, and they had to set the grid of the first race through collective test timing, which obviously skewed the results a bit. Some drivers like Nicola Solov and Bruno Del Pino were unlucky because they couldn't set representative lap times and they were just set back to the back of the grid. But honestly, could have been fun racing had it not been for the weather, because then when the race started, 20 minutes before, there was hail just falling down on the grid. That was testimony of Nick Gilks, friend of Feeder Series. After that, they got off on their way behind the safety car, and they spent nearly half the race there before they finally got the green light to continue. And after that, we did see some kind of interesting running, some mechanical issues, interestingly, that they haven't solved from the non-championship round in Aragon. Noah Lyle, Christian Hall, Campos suffering a lot. Owen Tanjavalu, who was set to start from pole position, he lost out. He was actually the first Vietnamese driver to secure pole position in an FIA-sanctioned series in Europe. Interesting point that, Javier Segura came off with a win. He's a strong contender for this year, but I don't think we've seen the full picture there.
And then you're talking, we've got Spanish F4 as well, which is, is it upcoming? Is it this weekend?
It's, next weekend. This weekend.
And what's
reporting.
Yeah, well, this is which one's next and which one's what's coming up basically? It's obviously Campos strong, Spanish I would imagine.
Coming up. Yeah, Campos VMP chapter. Who knows what chapter of the Campos VMP battle? I mean, there's so many championships where they're facing off. Most notably, I mean, we saw the start of that in Formula Winter Series. Andres Cardenas and Griffin Peebles facing off. Griffin Peebles from MP came out on top, but it was a tight battle for that championship. And I think the team that excites me most for this year is Campos. You know, they have a lot of exciting rookies. They have Enzo van Vanderskool, they have Nathan Ty, Jan Przyrowski. So a lot of exciting talents coming up from karting. And, I think they're well poised to take the team's championship this year. We've also got some interesting entries in terms of TC Racing. Thibaut Courtois, Real Madrid player, entering his own F4 team together with Roberto Marie. 38 entries that are planned for this season.
I was just looking on the Wikipedia for that, and I was like, that is a deep grid right there. They're coming to Portimao, which is why I was there. It's only half an hour away, and it's like they're coming there in June. That's a lot of single-seater cars on a single grid.
I think it speaks for the health of the series. I mean, it was only a few years back that they were around 20 entries, sometimes scraping to find those 20 entries, and now to get almost 40, I mean, I think speaks to how well this championship has been organized and the work that has been done to attract entries. And now you have some of the biggest teams in Europe competing there, and it's becoming a strong contender to Italian F4. I don't think it's at Italian F4's level yet, but I think you can give it a few years and they'll be neck and neck.
Lovely to see, it really is. And supporting Eurocup 3 at some of the rounds as well, so you get a very busy weekend, 5 times this season, Juan, so that'll be good for you. Now, Francesco, final thoughts just on the Euroformula Championship. We're talking there about the grid growing and potential future stuff. I don't want to put you under pressure, I don't want you to get you in trouble, but what can you tell us about your thoughts for the future of the championship as essentially a strong spokesperson for Euroformula?
Well, my hopes is that the new engine will come this year so that we can test it out ourselves, trying to mount it on the car and see what we need to change and what needs to be changed also on the spare parts and mechanical parts, because from what I've heard, the Japanese championship, the Super Formula Lights, has been postponed by 1 weekend because of mechanical failures on the clutch. So something needs to be changed on his engine, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because it's a much faster engine, and I hope that this will attract more people, even those interested in making the FIA F3 jump into testing our cars, racing with our cars, and then go into FIA F3 car.
It's there's a lot of unknowns at the moment, but I think the best thing for any sort of motorsport is to have as many championships as possible, as many people in cars as possible, and see what options are available. And I have to say, everybody I spoke to, yourself included, but even like speaking to Lorenzo, who did Formula Regional last year, just so complimentary of the car, the downforce, how it drives, and the frustrations of having, like you suggested, to go elsewhere for other purposes when actually the best car to drive at this level is Euroformula. So fingers crossed it can improve and have the grid grow over the coming years. But for the moment, I know we're going a little bit longer than expected, Francesco. So I'm going to have to get onto your questions and put you under the spotlight a little bit to get some of the questions that the audience wants to have. So
ready for it?
If you're braced for it, we'll get to the Ask FS part of the podcast and start with the all-important classic question from Checo of our Discord, who wants to know, what is your favorite type of cheese? Also, they want to say best of luck for the rest of the year. Go.
I say thank you to Checo, and I'm not very a fan of cheese. I ate it as much as I could when I was a little boy, and then I stopped eating it because, well, don't ask me why. But my favorite one is probably going to be Parmigiano Reggiano, the one that they produce near my house.
Oh, wow.
Which is very loved around all the world. Basically, tons and tons of cheese are transported from here to America, to India, to Asia, wherever you say it's been delivered.
I was just gonna say, I love the fact that you are so close to it. Do you find it actually tastes better when you have it like locally at home? I know you don't have it often, it sounds like.
I've never tasted it outside, but from what I can say is that everybody just loves it. Everybody just keeps ordering it, and we produce it, but we don't have a big factory like those big American factories. What we actually have here is that old farms converted into little shops that produce cheese. And then they stack them up because, you have to keep them inside for 12, 24, and 36 months. It depends on what you choose. And they stack them up so much that then I get why they can deliver them so many to all around the world.
Fascinating. This is why people come on the podcast or listen to the podcast, is to listen to this sort of. Who cares about driving? We get this sort of insight.
No one cares it.
Yeah. Well, some people do, unfortunately, because we've got a question from Raffle S on Twitter, X, whatever it is, who wants to know, how is it to be the only one to fight with the motorpark drivers?
It feels powerful.
Wow.
I like it because, as you said before, it gives me more idea of David versus Goliath. And it's basically what I feel every time is that championship kind of depends on me, because if I lose, if I see myself weakening, then the other will say, oh, again, motorpark dominance, or again, no one will come here, or again and again and again. I feel like I have a certain responsibility in keeping the motorpark guys under pressure and not letting them go, as like last year when we changed the tires and it was so unexpected. We couldn't do basically anything on the car that would get us faster. So it's a bit of a responsibility, and it gives me a lot of energy to do it also.
I love that. There's like David versus Goliath. I'm glad I brought that up because I think it's probably quite apt. But there are more food questions because it is a Feeder Series podcast, and we've got this one, which is again all important. This one's from Choco Blue WU on Discord. Do you like Chinese food or Japanese food?
I would say Japanese food. I prefer much more ramen. compared to the other things.
I have to point out at this point that there is a Chinese flag after their name on Discord,
Yeah,
so this is a
I'm
little
sorry.
awkward
I'm sorry, but you asked the question, so you need to be prepared for the answer. Yeah, never been a keen fan of Chinese food. There's also I don't know why it opened here in my city, a local ramen shop owned by an Italian, but with a very Japanese styles on making ramens. Even the restaurant itself, it's like being in Japan, being in Tokyo, for example. I don't know, just liked it, and I couldn't get out of it. I just kept eating it, and ask for a second dish.
I think being in Italy with all the food you have, and then having the other options like this, I love. I mean, if you want to ask me the question, which you didn't, Choco Blue W, yes is my answer because I love.
What is your opinion? What is your opinion?
What is my opinion? No, I don't have a preference. Honestly, I have Chinese food. I have a lot of Japanese food as well. I love noodles, but I also love Italian food. I mean, you can't go wrong. All of these different cuisines, it's excellent. There was also a question they had about what is the type of cheese called, the one with the sinky smell and the stripes, but I think that was actually in response to Checo, and I don't know, Choco Blue W. I'm so sorry. Back onto the audience questions to get a little bit more focused again. Vicky Valecki on X wants to know, which race are you most looking forward to this season?
Which
race are you most looking forward to this season?
I mean, I'm looking really forward to Spa. Because it's a train that I like very much. Also because last year, I don't know how I managed to end up on the podium after the red flag has been showed out, and it's such an amazing track when you enter Juan, full throttle, or very small lift.
Small lift on the way in, is it?
A small lift, yeah. And it was the best part because I would always catch up on the other motorpark guys. And it was so much fun. And it's such a big train that you get lost into it. Even when it rains, it only rains in a certain part and not the other part. So you get confused on how you need to approach a certain turn and how another. And yeah, I'm really forward to it.
I love the fact that I knew you had to lift off on the way in because when I spoke to Brad Benavides on the weekend, he said that the iRacing car is just very, very similar to the car that you have. So you can just jump in F3 and it's very similar. So there must be quite well mapped for me to say that and you to nod knowing full well. But I'm also going to ask Juan what his track that you're most looking forward to, which race you're most looking forward to. Because you've got Hockenheim next, then Spa, then Hungaroring, and Paul Ricard's Red Bull Ring, Barcelona, and Monza. That is a cracking calendar.
It's not, I mean, I don't know how I could choose, to be honest. I mean,
you're going to have to in the audience questions here.
The people wants to know.
I mean, the people want to know. I mean, I love Monza. I said it before earlier in the podcast. I mean, the pack racing that you had there, Francesco, you remember last year, it was all so tight. And, I mean, just a straight line speed. It has to be the Temple of Speed.
I think that's fair enough, and quite a close to the heart answer for Francesco as well, because Monza is much loved. I've got another question, which I think the first part is a little bit obvious, maybe. So sorry, Chris Suter on X, but I want to know the first bit. Do you hope to stay in single seaters after Euroformula Open? Which I think is probably, but I don't know. But then also said maybe F3 again because you have had some F3 experience, FIA F3, should I say?
Yes. Well, the dream is to always drive the Euroformula car, but then the reality comes in and says, can't do that, sorry. It's a difficult car. And with my with the university, and it's not easy to maintain this championship at a very high level and also do university in a very high level. So something needs to go, it needs to be changed. And what I'm more focused on for my career is not become a full-time race driver, but having this as a more of a passion and have sport races in GT3, GT4, whatever it is. And yes, so the dream is to continue the Euroformula. And the question about the FIA F3, well, in terms of cost, it's a lot more compared to Euroformula. And it takes a lot of time away from me. And since, as I said at the start of this question, I'm doing university, I'm doing an engineering degree, I need to really put the first thing on top of my list, which is university and then racing. This has always been something throughout my entire life, but when I was in high school, everything could be managed very well. It wasn't that hard. It wasn't that hard on me. And now things are coming in very hard. Exams, lessons, daily lessons. Well, basically, I start at 7 a.m. and I come back home at 7 p.m. It stresses you a lot. So the dream is to continue, but I know it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, when you see there's a race and I can just go, when it's not Portimao and I just have to go out there, and I can just go onto YouTube and watch it for 30 minutes on a Sunday. You're flying out on like a Tuesday. You left on the Monday, I think, when it's just like a whole week commitment. So I do totally understand that. Maybe it answers this question from Adzi, also on Discord. With your countryman Antonelli having effectively skipped F3 to go to F2, will you be looking at doing the same after running in Euroformula instead this year? It sounds like that's probably a no.
No, it's a no. It's a no. I didn't have as much visibility as he had. I mean, he conducted very well the F4 championship and the Frika championship, and it's not something that I want. It's not in my ethic to become a pro driver, a race car pro driver, and even have it as a job. In my ethic, this needs to be as a passion, just a simple play passion that I can take longer. Even when I'm going to be 50 years old, I still have this passion, and I won't depend on it. I rather work to do it.
I like that. It's some of the costs which you've alluded to, which we can't really probably go public with, that I've heard about the F3 and F2 seats. It's a lot of money involved in that, and I don't know many of the 17-year-olds who actually have that much money themselves who can just afford to go, I've earned this.
They can either do as Antonelli did, or just do as many championships like Stroll, for example, in which he bought Prema to do the other championship. And I don't have that type of opportunity on me to skip championship and still be considered a very respected driver.
Well, before we go too far down and get some slander cases against us from Aston Martin or anything.
Shit.
I'm just fun. I'm just joking. Let's Juan, put your hands up. Final question from Vicky again, from Vicky on X, Twitter. God, I can't get out of my head. And Juan, why don't you let us know your answer as well as Francesco? Why don't you go first, in fact, Juan, and Francesco can think of it, because I see there's a car pictured behind him. What is your dream car?
Ooh.
Okay, this is going to be a bit of an ironic answer now, but Aston Martin, I think Advantage is the dream.
You've got no chance. Lawrence is already on the phone.
No chance. I'm blacklisted. I know I'll turn up and, blacklist, immediately turned away.
Well, you took your chance.
Francesco, how about yourself? This
is not. This is a meme that my friends made, and I actually had to buy this from one of my friends.
Buy the car?
No, the car, the image itself. No, my favorite one. Well, I have quite a few ones. The favorite one is, on the street, it's going to be the Nissan GTR. All the models from the 33 to the 35. Also the new one that will probably come sooner or later. And on track, my favorite car is actually the Superformula car.
Oh, it does look gorgeous.
It looks amazing. From an aerodynamic point of view, it feels like you could do basically every turn. If you put it on a high downforce with all angles of the front wing and the rear wing as much as you can, I think you could do every corner flat out. I mean, what's stopping you from doing that?
The tyres, I think, but I understand your point. They're just going
to burst after one lap. If you can do one lap, it's fine. One hell of a lap.
Well, actually, on a similar note, and again, it wasn't asked for me, but I think the BMW I think it's an 08 F1 08, the 2008 one, which was like the peak F1 aero craziness, is also up there for me. I love that car because of the crazy aero. But
I hope they're going to come back. Going to come back.
Well, it's all underfloor now, but that was just hilarious. How much? It's like, how many wings do you want in a car? Just put them everywhere. Why not?
Just
I
put
love that
everything
sort of
that you need. You think of something on a wing, we put it. Just say
it. Exactly. That was an era long gone. But if you want good aero, and how about this rounding out a podcast? Head to Euroformula. That's where the best aero is in the feeder series world. So thank you so much, Francesco. Thank you, Juan. And also thank you, Calla, who's had to leave to go and actually do some proper journalist reporting in the press conference. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. No, thank you for coming on. If you're watching on YouTube, please drop a like on the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It all really helps us out. And if you're listening, leaving a review on the podcast platform you're listening on is greatly appreciated. Finally, check out feederseries.net for more feeder series insights. And follow feeder_series and FS Americas on X and Feeder Series Net on Instagram. You can find the links to all of those, plus where to find everyone in this episode in the YouTube description or the podcast show notes. Until next time, we've been the Feeder Series Podcast. Goodbye.